Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we mentioned in the previous episode, integration is not a one-way street, but it involves the person who wants to integrate and the society that is ready to accept this very person. In contrast, assimilation is an individual decision to adapt. It can be described as the process whereby outsiders, immigrants, or subordinate groups become indistinguishable within the dominant host society, eventually conforming to the existing cultural norms of society. Assimilation equals to a loss of cultural, religious, ethnic identity and an expectation of conformity to the norms of the majority. As we have to look into history in order to learn a lesson, we can find some excellent examples of assimilation and the result of this. Firstly, let's look into medieval Europe. In the 13th century, the Tatar Muslims from Central Asia had to flee their homeland because of the Mongol hordes. They found refuge in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth or Union, a region which nowadays comprises a number of countries in Eastern Europe, such as Lithuania, Poland, Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, Latvia, and Estonia. The result of the acceptance of these refugees is the existence of Muslim Tatar villages and population in most of those countries. However, the vast majority of Tatars do not identify themselves with Islam and do not practice the deen. Some possess the ethnic identity as Tatars, but most of them don't even speak the Tatar language. When they arrived in the Polish-Lithuanian Union, they were allowed to marry non-Muslim women. This sign of tolerance, however, created families with children whose mothers neither speak Tatar nor follow the rules of Islam. The fathers and husbands were serving in the army and were often gone for a longer period of time, leaving the mothers and wives behind with their children. So, one generation after the other lost their culture, traditions, and their deen, became assimilated, and lost their Islamic identity. They even formed part of the wave of the Catholic mass migration to the US together with the Catholic Poles. Nowadays, they have totally assimilated into their host countries and have become part of the countries of Poland, Belarus, Lithuania, etc. As we have seen in the previous episode, the American way of life attracted a huge number of immigrants, and the idea was to create the perfect American out of all newcomers who would lose their own identity, culture, traditions, and religion. They would assimilate into a new identity just as the German immigrants did. They became part of the white Christian elite in America. Nowadays, the vast majority of this largest immigrant population is so assimilated that they don't speak any German at all and are as much part of the American ruling class as all Anglos. Let not the previously peaceful example make you think that such a process of assimilation is desired, because as you will soon see, countless numbers of peoples have tried this and were inevitably taken by surprise as their lives were violently wiped away.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes.
One very important example are the Jews in Nazi Germany, who were so assimilated into German society that the Nazis only recognized them by their surnames. The Jews had lost their traditions, their culture, and their religion. They adapted the appearance and the ways of the non-Jewish Germans, but were still persecuted and killed by the Nazis. Last but not least, the recent massacre in Europe in the 1990s and the breakup of Yugoslavia. It showed us that the main victims of the war were the Muslims, who were as assimilated in Yugoslavia as the Jews were in Germany. As it was the case during Nazi Germany, so for the Slavic Muslims in Yugoslavia, who were so assimilated that the only way to recognize them was only by their names or by finding out if they were circumcised. The huge majority of Yugoslavian Muslims did not adhere to the 5 basic principles of Islam and were living the same life any other Yugoslavian citizen was living. They would not pray 5 times a day, not pay zakat, barely fast, and not pay attention to the obligation of the Hajj. Furthermore, the Muslims would drink alcohol and celebrate the feasts of the non-Muslims. They would be each other's friends and would even marry non-Muslims, men or women alike. So the Muslims in Yugoslavia were shocked to see their neighbors or even their friends turn against them in the war and mistreating them or even kill them. The war and breakup of Yugoslavia happened between 1992 and 1995, and the Muslims had to pay the highest price.